Hi everyone, I'm Mark and this is the 7th episode of the Saudi Football Fanatics podcast. Just to let you know, we are recording this episode on the 9th of November, still before the beginning of game week 13. So please excuse us if there is other news until the release of this session. Since Andris is still trying to stay alive at the other end of the world, we will talk through our topics with Gyula. Hi Gyula.
Hi.
Any news about Andris?
Well, I have both some good and some bad news. I start with the good news. And the good news is that he survived the visit of the famous Fraser Island and its dingoes. I think it's quite a miracle. However, the bad news is that since then, the amount of information we received about his whereabouts and well-being are rather scarce. And whenever we received them, they are quite frightening. Sometimes he talks and sends us pictures about some giant spiders.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Yes, that indeed sounds really disturbing.
Yes, especially if you consider the fact that Australia is full of highly venomous spider species. On the bright side, though, since 1979, there were no reports of deaths caused by spider bites, though it's quite an unbelievable statistics that no one died because of spiders, but it was more than 40 years, if I count correctly. But let's be clear, I cannot wait for the safe return of our King Cup specialist.
Yeah, you are not alone with that. So, since we are talking about Australia, we can move on to our actual first point, as the Kingdom will be organizing the 2034 World Cup, preventing a possible tender from Australia. We spoke about this earlier, so instead of repeating ourselves, firstly, we of course congratulate the Kingdom for this success. And secondly, we try to summarize how the Kingdom won the right to organize the event beyond the actual FIFA rules. Gyula?
Sorry, no. We talked about the reasons, so I won't repeat it. We talked about it in the previous podcast, so...
Thanks for that then.
Sorry, really, but I think the main reason is quite easy. Australia did not submit a tender for the organization of the World Cup, so they couldn't win. And Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom, was the only country who actually submitted a valid tender, so they won. But instead, let me share my thoughts on this topic. Firstly, I would like to congratulate to the Kingdom as well. It's really nice, and from a personal perspective, I'm overjoyed to hear this. Not only because we are hosting, a Sunday football podcast, so it's not the only reason. But think about this for a moment. Australia, as you already noted, is on the other half of the globe, and this means a horrible time zone for European fans. You can imagine how few matches they would be able to watch if Australia would be the World Cup host. And further to that, I mentioned time zone, but actually I should have mentioned time zones, because Australia uses 3 different time zones. And the worst one for European fans would be, if Australia won, it would have been the Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is and would be probably used by the majority of the big cities that would likely have hosted the matches in the southeastern part of Australia. But enough about this beating around the bush, like talking mode. The time zone is 10 hours ahead of us in this region, which means that if it is 8 p.m. in the evening here in Europe, in Central Europe, then it's 6 in the morning there. Not very nice. And if you add to that the traveling times within the continent of Australia, this could also cause some tiredness and minor jet lag issues for the players too, as not only the fans would be unhappy here in Europe, but probably some players too. And, not to mention the other issues we already talked about, like the dingoes and these venomous spiders.
Yeah, and after these dingoes and spiders, I recommend to turn on the actual matches. But before we talk about the RSL, there were tough matches and big surprises in the King's Cup. Which was the biggest surprise for you? But I think I know the answer, as I know mine opinion.
You likely refer to the victory of Abha over Alakli.
Exactly.
Yes, and yeah, we can really count this as a surprise, and not only because of their squad differences, because actually Abha played most of the second half with 10 men, and the added time of that second half with 9 men. But let me put this into perspective first, because it was a classic Kings Cup match, a very heated derby, 31 fouls, 21 committed by Abha players, which obviously resulted in the 2 red cards for Abha, as I already mentioned. And there was an insane amount of VAR checks for potential penalties too. But let me remind you, this is not the English Premier League, and no random penalties were given. So, back to the match, I should start talking about the actual happenings on the field instead of statistics. Things fastened up during the extra time of the first half when Ahmed Abdul Jabbar put Abha in front with a clever header, and before the halftime whistle, Mahrez stepped from the penalty spot with a really calm and well-placed shot. Actually, this is how you take a penalty, in my opinion. And let me note that the penalty was given for a very rare foul. The ball defending the free kick committed a handball. I don't think you see many of such fouls overall. But giving the penalty for this was the right decision. It was a clear and clear-cut handball. Just to quickly conclude this match so that we can move on to other matches like the RSL and other topics. And before I bore you.
You could never bore me with an Abha match, and hopefully our listeners either.
I'm not so sure, but okay, I try to conclude it quickly. Abha went down to 10 men a few minutes after the start of the second half. Zakaria Sami Al-Sudani committed a really unnecessary foul against Firmino from behind and got a deserved red card for this. Actually tried to capitalize on this error, but they couldn't take the lead. Even Firmino was denied by the crossbar, so it was 1-1, and instead of Al-Ahly taking the lead, it was former Olympic Lyon legend Karl Toko Ekambi who took the lead for Abha after wonderfully seizing control of a long ball, sending his defender the wrong way and beating Mendy. Beautiful individual performance from him, and magnificent goal, I think. And can you imagine, it was Abha who scored again, but this time the goal was disallowed for a foul in the build-up play. And the game was not over, as you could guess. There was a lot more drama, especially in the extra time when another red card was shown for Abha attacker François Camano for a second yellow card. And further VAR show denied Al-Ahly from a potential penalty.
Okay, and I think we are done with Abha, maybe.
Yeah.
So there's another question. Which was the toughest match, in your opinion?
Well, from a physicality perspective, we already talked about the toughest one. It was this Abha Al-Ahly match. But to take your question seriously, and actually not so seriously about the tough part, 2 red cards were delivered on the Al Nassr Al Ettifaq match too. And now to move to the serious part, this was probably the match most anticipated by everyone, and this is the match I'm going to talk about a little bit more, which ended with the narrow victory of Al Nassr thanks to Mane's goal in extra time. But regardless of the end result, this was such an eventful match that we could talk an entire episode about it. But since I already talked too much and we have 2 RSL rounds to cover, let me just advise everyone who missed this match to watch the highlight instead of me talking more minutes about it. Many more minutes, because actually we talk a little more. You will not regret watching the highlights, believe me. because the goalless normal time does not reflect the intensity and the insane amount of quality chances created during this match. It really shows how a prestigious contest is the King's Cup. So I will be brief. Talisca was sent off in the extra time of the first half, so Al-Nassr played most of the second half with 10 men. Actually, Talisca was sent off right after he was disallowed a goal after a lengthy VAR check for a very narrow offside. So in a matter of minutes, Talisca went from 0 to 0. But this advantage was gone when Ali Hazazi was also sent off just before the end of the normal time, at the end of the second half. Actually, a number of players lost their nerves in this scene, and it wouldn't have been a surprise if additional players are sent off, but not even yellow cards were given, which was really a bit of a surprise, but the tension was insane. In the end, Mane delivered the only goal of the match. I already mentioned it, and let's conclude it. So really watch the highlights. You won't regret it. But let's move on to our next topic about the fact that 8 teams are remaining, and the next round, the quarterfinals, will take place on December. But sorry, one more thing to note here before we talk about the quarterfinals. There was one more heated derby, actually Al-Khelai versus Damak, which also presented a red card during the extra time for Al-Khelai, who anyway went through after a very lengthy penalty shutout. And this was the only cup fixture decided by penalties in this round.
So, thanks for this summary. So we have now the fixtures of the quarterfinals, and maybe we can have a little guessing game about it. At least we could become clowns again, just like after our last guesses. And the first one, maybe you should start with Hilal versus Tavun.
Okay, I favor Hilal for this one. Mainly because the latest results and the form of Al-Tawun is not really convincing me, but really a tough one. I do not expect many goals on this one because we speak about 2 teams with very strong defenses. So anyway, why would anyone expect a lot of goals anyway?
I think it as well that this is the toughest one. But without Neymar and taking into consideration that the Champions League is still a priority next to the RSL, I would vote for Tavun. Tight win after extra time.
The good thing is that one of us will be right. But let me remind you that Al Hilal already ensured its progress from the group stage of the Champions League. So this will unlikely be an issue here. Likely to be an issue here, but I agree with you on that this match can easily see extra time or even penalties, but I still go with Al Hilal here. And okay, I think we covered this match extensively. Let's move to Abha, because we already talked about Abha. What are your thoughts about Abha versus Al-Khelai?
So Abha was able to beat Ahli with 10 men, or actually 9, as you mentioned. So for me, no question, Abha is my favorite.
Yes, but let us not forget about the resilience of Al-Khelai either, who progressed through penalties and also went down to 10 men during the extra time. So, yes, difficult, but I agree with you that Abha's heroics were superior to this, and I will also vote for them to progress to the semi-finals. Okay,
and after this Abha-Khelai derby, let's continue with the biggest surprise, Faisali against the Tigers.
Yes, I think we can see a surprise here, and probably the only remaining second division team will do everything to prove me right. I vote for a narrow Faisali victory through extra time or penalties.
Yeah, interesting. And not nice to say that, but I think that Ittihad has no chance to win the RSL now, and therefore we'll do everything to win the cup this time. I'm with Ittihad on this one.
We'll see. Again, at least one of us will be right. Let's see the last fixture. which is Al-Shabaab versus Al-Nassr, a classic Riyadh derby. What a match! What a match!
This is another tough one. My heart is with Shabab, but I have the feeling that if Ronaldo stays fit for the whole season, Nasr will win the treble. Not only the league, not only the cup, but the Champions League as well. So, Nasr to the semi-finals in a tight match.
Yes, what you said about Al Ittihad is, however, also applicable to Al Shabaab because their RSR position doesn't look very promising. So I think they will go all in on the cup. But I get your point on the Ronaldo factor or the Talisca factor. But my heart is with Carrasco's team, and I also think that a difficult one. But unfortunately for Carrasco, I have to say that I'm with Al-Nassr on this one.
Roshan!
Saudi League. Finally, we can move on to the 11th and 12th round of the RSL. This time, we will not talk about all the games, but try to highlight the most important ones, mainly the matches of the Big Six and the goal parades. Let's start with the league leaders.
A strong choice of start to the review of the events of the round number 11, as probably this was the most anticipated match of this game week. And so we started with Al Hilal versus Al Ahly, just to make it sure that everyone can follow us. The game started quite eventfully. A long ball from Koulibaly was excellently received and handled by Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, who put the visitors in front in the 3rd minute with a calm finish. Then something very rare happened. A questionable penalty decision resulted in a Hilal penalty. Before we start blaming the referee or trying to judge the decision, let's know that there were multiple Al Ahly defensive mistakes, so it would be harsh not to blame their defense first, and as all this hassle could have easily been avoided. But in the end, I think I understand why the penalty was given, so he can't really complain too much about it, although they can complain to some extent. But then another very rare thing happened after this. Can you believe it? Mitrovic missed the penalty. Actually, it was quite an easy save for Mendy. It was a blatant penalty. I don't remember when I saw Mr. Mitrovic missing a penalty last time, but it definitely wasn't today. But now we will remember. By the way, he started his run-up from several miles behind the ball, and you could guess from seeing this run-up that he will miss the penalty. I don't understand. Do you understand why the players make such big runs before a penalty?
Actually, I like these dumb penalties.
Oh, no.
Just like myself in a Sunday League match against, for example, failing Pottyantók.
Well, okay, then I'm alone on this one. But do not worry, because Mr. Mitrovic recovered quickly and scored a classic Mitrovic-esque header, well placed in the far corner in the 37th minute, giving not even a slimmer of chance for Mendy this time to save it. Let me also mention the wonderful cross from Abdul Hamid, because the entire attack looked like as if it was a FIFA gameplay video. It was so perfect. And after the second goal, Hilal could have easily gone up to 3 goals, but this time the crossbar saved Mendy, following Malcolm's stunning free kick. And instead, the 3rd goal was scored by Al Ahly, because Alan Saint-Maximin pulled one back after another very rare situation. We rarely see such confusion and chain of defensive errors from the otherwise strong Al Hilal defense, which they did before this goal. So the game became open again, but another defensive error happened, and this time on the other side, which sealed the fate of Al Ahly. Ibanez misjudged the position of his goalkeeper and kindly put the ball into his own net. And there is not too much salvation for Ibanez here, because he was not even under pressure, but unfortunately for him and for Al-Ahly, these things sometimes happen.
Yeah, and I'm sure Ibanez will recover from this mistake. He's a top professional.
Yeah, exactly, but Al-Ahly couldn't recover, so Al-Hilal kept all the 3 points at home, an important 3 points.
Yeah, and since we are talking about Hilal, I think we should continue with our next match against Fateh. As Fateh was in excellent form and on its way to the Champions League spot, it appeared to be a tough one for Hilal. Or, at least it could have been a tight one, but thanks to Mitrovic and his newly developed penalty-taking skills, after Salem Al-Dafshari was fouled, whom we will talk about later, the away team took the lead pretty early in the 5th minute. After that, the game seemed to be equalized. There were several chances on both sides, missed by, for example, Malcolm or Teo, and also the goalkeepers had a great day. The result remained the same for the halftime. Al Fateh dominated the second half, but they missed everything a man can. The heroes of the previous rounds, like Christian Teo and Zelarayan, who played excellent this time as well, were not able to score again. And in the overtime came the legend again, and after nicely dribbling himself through the defenders, the captain, Salem, scored Al Hilal's second goal and decided the game. The winning streak of Al Fateh came to an end, but they are still fighting for the Champions League, while Hilal is 4 points ahead of Al Nassr.
And let's note here that there were some doubts that the injury of Neymar Jr. could hinder the gold medal hopes of Al Hilal, but I think that these critics are now silenced. Because I mean, beating both Al Ahly and this very strong Al Fateh team, as you mentioned, they had a wonderful unbeaten run. Beating this Al Fateh team, especially with that conceding a goal from, it just shows how Hilal takes it seriously. They are serious business, a really nicely built up team.
Yeah, but we will see. Their top match is still ahead of us. So prepare for the 1st of December when Hilal will meet Nasser. I'm sure that it will be the most important match of the season.
Yeah, indeed. It can be indeed a season deciding contest, and we will have a very nice December, by the way, because we will have those epic Kings Cup quarterfinals shortly after this big derby you mentioned, and this is also the transfer window is rapidly advancing, so I can't wait to see what will happen. Who are going to sign for the RSL, but let's not get carried away and get back to the football pitch.
Yeah, I agree. So after the leaders, I would continue in Jeddah with one of the worst teams in the last 5 games, the reigning champion Al Ittihad. Although Ittihad was able to take the lead with the goal of Benzema in the middle of the first half, it was not enough to finally win again, since they were not able to beat one of the weakest teams, Al Hazm, at home. The rest of the first half was a little bit calmer, but in the 63rd minute, after a beautiful cross, Al Thani equalized, which was his second goal of the season. The Ittihad fans may have thought that they won the game when, after a beautiful Karim solo, he passed the ball to the open Kadesh, who did not fail. It was 2-1 in the 81st minute, but still not over. After a big chance and a beautiful save, Faiz Selemani scored his third goal of the season. 2-2, Hazem stayed in the relegation zone, and the Tigers continued their poor run, but it was just the beginning.
Yeah, just the beginning, but let me remind you, I will repeat myself, if Soleimani keeps on scoring so many important goals, then even if Al Hazm relegates, Soleimani will likely stay in this division.
Yeah, but it is only his third one. From my point of view, it is not so many goals.
Okay, we will see, but yeah, as you mentioned, the things just got worse for Al Ittihad in the next round. They had to travel to Riyadh to play with Al Shabaab, and we can say that this was a match of 2 out-of-form teams. Al Ittihad wanted to recover from the previously mentioned Hazem match, while Al-Shabaab was beaten by none else but Abha. So obviously, both teams wanted to get back on track and win this match. And from hindsight, we can see that both of them had their respective chances to do that. So overall, both teams could have won this match, but the only goal was scored by Carlos at the 13th minute, which put a lot of pressure on the visitors for almost the entire match. And they were unable to respond during the 90 minutes. And let me also note here that our favorite Carrasco had a dominant display for Al-Shabaab, had a questionable penalty not given to him at the end of the first half, but overall he can be delighted with this match and with his performance as well, because his commanding leadership skills were essential in collecting all 3 points for the home team.
Yeah, classic Carrasco.
Yeah, indeed.
So now, following the big ones, but it is not true for Etihad, but let it be this way. So after the big ones, we should speak a little bit about the mid and low table. 2 games from the 11th round.
Yeah, I'm careful with statements like this about Al-Ittihad or Shabab. But yeah, they are still wonderful teams, but are in bad form. But let's move really to the other end of the table, and let us know that there were quite interesting fixtures, quite interesting and eventful fixtures actually in the 2 rounds we are discussing. We had to make a tough decision and pick a match to talk about, and we, made a decision, and we picked Al-Thai versus Al-Riyadh. And as this was a crucial match for both teams in the fight against relegation, and this turned out to be a goal fest. The visitors took the lead early thanks to Salem Al-Abbas, and another reminder from me, we mentioned it in one of our transfers related episodes, the 28-year-old forward failed to score a single goal during his spell with Al-Khalay last year, but he seems to be a very good signing nonetheless, because this season it's already his 4th goal. But however, despite taking the lead, this was quickly turned over by Al-Thai, and in the first half actually, because Mario Zugancic scored in the 28th minute, then Alfa Semedo in the 40th minute, and it became 3-1 just before the halftime, as Rakam Al-Samlan did one more goal for the home team during the stoppage time. So Al-Thai waited for the halftime whistle with a convincing lead, and you could see the celebrations of the home team players to understand how much these goals and the result meant to them. So then came the halftime, and in the second half the match became a little bit more even, and the Al-Thai defense was really playing with fire despite their slimmer 2-goal lead. We have seen 2-goal leads being turned over several times in history, so they should have been a little bit more careful.
Yeah, that's the most dangerous result, as Janos Chunk said before.
Yeah, 2-goal leads are not so comfortable. Indeed, Mohamed Shvirek went closest to scoring for the visitors, as his effort was cleared off the line very luckily with the help of the crossbar. I could really count themselves really lucky here. A little bit too much release from me, but they really were lucky, believe me. And in the end, the defense capitulated, and the home team gave away a cheap penalty during the extra time area with a consolation goal, which they fully deserved. But that was not enough. I got away with their game with the fire, if I can use this phrase, and the end result was 3-2 for Al-Thai, which means that very precious 3 points were awarded for the home team, who actually played another goal fest in the next round, a 3-3 draw with Al-Fayha, and so if you count 3+1, these 4 points are the difference between them and the relegation zone. So really good 2 rounds for Al-Thai overall. But let us move away from the bottom of the table and go to the other contest we picked, a big encounter between Al-Wehda and Al-Ettifaq.
Yeah, thanks, Yula. A real 5-goal thriller from Mecca. The goal parade started with the header of Gini Wijnaldum after Munir showed 2 insane saves. To be honest, I do not know what the defenders thought during this scene. I recommend all of you to watch it. They seem to be sitting in a cinema, not like the Dutch international. 19 minutes later, Goodwin equalized with an absolute stunner. It was certainly a good candidate for the goal of the week. 1-1. Ettifaq scored another goal, but it was denied by the VAR, 1-1 at the halftime as well. At the beginning of the second half, after a beautiful action, Goodwin scored his second goal, which was his fifth one this season. He's the team leader on this field with Igalo now. A great impact from the new boy. After this, Wijnaldum had a nice header, which was saved by Munir again, but it was not enough for Gini. After a chaos in the box, he scored his second goal, another brace from him. Everyone thought that it remained a draw, but then Demarai Gray came in the 98th minute and shot the ball to the low corner. Poor Munir barely could touch the ball. 3-2 to Ettifaq. After 2 losses, Ettifaq barely won this game, and since then they played a 0-0 against a weak Riad on home ground. I think they are totally out of form, and a miracle should happen in order to count with them in the race for the top 4. But beyond the top 4, Gyula, what is your opinion regarding the title contenders?
Yeah, considering the last 5 matches, to give you a diplomatic answer, Al-Hilal and Al-Nassr are really in top form. Just what you would expect from, as you mentioned, title contenders. Because there were actually 3 teams who collected all the 6 points from the last 2 rounds we covered. Al-Hilal, Al-Nassr, and make a guess, and Abha.
Yeah, and also Abha was able to reach the quarterfinals in the King Cup, just like Hilal and Nasr did.
They are really starting to come into good form. But back to your original question, let's also note that Al Tawun, who are still around the top of the table and are still unbeaten for a long period, could come in contention for this title fight, but they have drawn their last 3 matches, dropping valuable 6 points. But nevertheless, I would still be careful with statements that the title race is restricted to the duo of Al-Hilal and Al-Nassr. And by the way, if we are talking about Al-Nassr, because we haven't talked about them too much apart from the Kings Cup result, and for the record of the Al-Nassr fans and Ronaldo fans, Al-Nassr, so as I previously mentioned, collected all 6 points possible from the last 2 rounds, winning against Al-Fayha on away ground 3-1, and they kept all 3 points at home versus Al-Qalay in a 2-0 victory. And let us praise Talisca here, who scored twice versus Al-Fayha, which moved him to the 3rd spot on the goal scorers list with 8 goals, and only his teammate Ronaldo with 12 and Mitrovic with 9 goals are ahead of him. So we can say that Talisca is really in fine form.
Yeah, and just to remind you all, as I mentioned before, we will see these giants against each other on the 1st of December when they meet in the King Fahd Stadium in Riyadh. It is definitely a one-to-watch game. And now, since the end of this episode is approaching, some short but interesting news. The Kingdom's national hero, previously mentioned, Salem Al-Dafshari, who scored the winning goal against Argentina in the World Cup, has been named the Footballer of the Year by the Asian Football Federation. Al-Dafshari was and is one of the most important players of Al Hilal during their recent successes. This year, he has already scored 7 goals and given an assist in 12 matches in the RSL, and may have a crucial role, especially in the absence of Neymar, as captain of the team. Congratulations to him, and we hope that he will help the national team again to qualify for the next World Cup as well.
Yes, absolutely deserved. Congratulations to him from me too. And let's note that he celebrated this award in a fashionable way by scoring a stoppage time goal against Alpha Tech to ensure his team's victory in the previously mentioned crucial match for Al Hilal. One more interesting piece of news I have for you is from last week that former Manchester City legend Yaya Toure is set to join Roberto Mancini's coaching team as an assistant coach at the Saudi Arabia national team. Some reunion on this is.
Is this official already? But to be honest, if we have already seen something like this in the news, it is almost certain that it has already happened in the background, and hopefully not a daily close kind of situation.
This story either already happened or not. I think it will happen shortly. It's quite believable. I'm sure if it happens or happened, it will be a fruitful cooperation. They've already achieved big things together in the past. And let me also know that coaching is not something new to Toure, as he has collected some crucial coaching experiences as an assistant coach at several clubs for the past 2 years. And during this 2-year spell, when he was not an assistant coach, he was the academy coach of Tottenham for some time. So this role will not be unknown to him.
And another news regarding coaching stuff. Nuno Espirito Santo was fired by Etihad thanks to their weak performance in the league. For me, not surprising at all. But based on this, I may reconsider my guess for the cup. Etihad could get a new impulse by the future new coach. We will see.
You mentioned not surprising. Well, not so sure, but one thing is sure, that this league is unforgiving. You have a run of bad form in the last month and you are to be sacked. Yes, I understand. And I understand your point too. Al Ittihad had a poor run of form. They lost the Jeddah Derby at home. They lost to Al Shabaab most recently, which we covered. But, let's be honest. It was quite a tricky run of fixtures in the league for them, while on the other hand, they progressed in the King's Cup. And they are doing well in the Champions League. And honestly, if you watch the Shabab match, if you watched it or you watch the highlights, if you haven't done that, you can see that it could have gone either way. So overall, I think it's a harsh decision, but it is what it is. But it's true that Al Ittihad had, as the reigning champion, they had obviously big plans for the league, and if you want to compete at the highest level, then it is not acceptable to lose prestigious matches like the match against Al Ahly or Al Shabaab, or not being able to beat Artavun regardless of their strong defense and fine form. So from this perspective, yes, I can understand the decision, but I'm not so sure that a new coach would do much better. But we will see. I'm curious to see who will be the next appointment of the Jeddah-based team.
Okay, thanks for that. And if there are no other topics...
Sorry, there is one more.
Okay.
We haven't covered the midweek Champions League matches, but I understand that we're running out of time, so I will be quick.
Oh, that's true. Thanks.
Yeah. So the fourth round of the 6 rounds of the group stage took place just a few days before we make this recording. And let's just briefly summarize it this way. It was quite a mixed week for the Kingdom's teams. While Al Ittihad and Al Fayha lost their respective matches, Al Hilal and Al Nassr were victorious. And Talisca, whose fine form I already mentioned, had a nice hat-trick against Aldo Hail, and certain Philippe Coutinho scored the 2 goals of the home team. And so this is how the Riyadh-based team won this eventful match 3-2, thanks to Talisca's hat-trick on away grounds. And just to take a quick look at the tables, the victories of Al Hilal and Al Nassr ensured that they will progress from their group regardless of the results of the last 2 matches. While Al Ittihad is still leading their respective group, they still have to be vigilant. They can still fail to progress, but I think they will progress. And the toughest situation is for Al Fayha, who are at the bottom of their group, but fortunately, they still have every chance to progress if they win their last 2 matches.
Good to hear that there is still a chance for them. And thanks for this short Champions League summary. I think then this was all for this episode, right?
Yeah. We can close.
So, thanks. So, if you liked it, follow and rate us on Spotify, and also check us on Instagram and Facebook under the account of Saudi Football Fanatics. See you soon.